One of the biggest pieces of news from this past week was Microsoft's announcement of some big layoffs at Xbox, letting go of about 8% of their total staff post-merger with Activision Blizzard King. Xbox is reporting most of this as redundancies, but we're already seeing very clearly that there's a lot of other people being affected by this. It's honestly just not great for a lot of reasons. Lots of losses at established developers like Toys for Bob. It's just not fun. One of the other departments, though, that looks like it's being slimmed down, and what I want to focus on a little bit more in today's video, has to do with Xbox's management of physical games. Now, obviously, because of how widespread and large the layoffs are, we're still getting bits and pieces of information of where exactly all the cuts are occurring. When it comes to their departments that deal with distribution of physical versions of games, the main source of info I'm going off of for this right now comes from Jez Corden. He's a writer for Windows Central, and part of his reporting cited that one of the major departments impacted are those responsible for handling bringing a lot of Xbox first-party games to physical format. And this lines up with a couple other things we've been seeing lately when it comes to Xbox and physical versions of games. Historically, it's not really any surprise that as far as any of the major companies go, Xbox is the one most in favor of pushing towards digital focus as quickly as possible. In fact, when it comes to at least their home consoles, they were the first one to push a all-digital option for their system, with the original Xbox One getting a digital-only version. And then with this generation, obviously, they launched the Xbox Series S alongside the Series X. Game Pass has been a very heavy focus, which is obviously a digital-focused service, not exactly something that makes sense with physical. And there's been a lot of recent news stories in the past year that point towards trying to get to that digital focus as quickly as possible. In fact, as recent as last week, there were reports of Walmart having to get rid of all of their physical copies of Starfield, which did lead to a lot of speculation and wonder from people of whether or not this is something we'll be seeing happen across other retailers and happen with other physical games that are related to Xbox games. There are major Xbox titles that have not received physical releases at all. For instance, Hi-Fi Rush, which released last year and was a major hit for Xbox, has not had any kind of physical version whatsoever, not even in any kind of limited edition format or something handled through another distributor. And while currently it sounds like this may not actually be the next plan moving forward, as part of all the major leaks that happened as part of the Activision Blizzard case, there were those early documents that showed plans for a mid-cycle refresh in the form of a digital-only Series X, offering Series X performance and power, but dropping the disk drive entirely, similar to how the Series S doesn't have one at all. Now, in response to that particular leak, there was talk about how that was something that was being considered at one point, but isn't actually currently in the running plans. Obviously, something we'll never know for sure until it actually gets announced or just never announced at all. But there is definitely that clear pattern that, especially as far as the big companies go, Xbox is definitely trying to get to that all-digital future as fast as possible. Now, I will say that on that note, Jez Corden himself, in his article talking about where layoffs were occurring for this, did note that, this alone necessarily isn't something where you can just jump the gun and say that immediately in the near future, Xbox is going to just completely get rid of all their physical games right here, right now, but it certainly isn't a good sign for it. Now, as much as I personally love physical media, I have tried to focus on keeping it alive as much as possible. Xbox actually is a platform where I have been leaning a bit more digitally, and all digital is something that I do think is a bit of an inevitability. It's not something that's going to necessarily happen overnight, but we've already seen the transition happen as far as how the larger market has been getting digital more and more, especially thanks to everything that was 2020 when we had a worldwide pandemic. That boosted a lot of digital sales because people found it a lot more convenient than trying to grab physical copies of games and allowed them to dive in right away. Digital certainly has its benefits, and that's why people have been going in that direction. But I definitely can't say that the idea of a digital-only future is something that I'm excited about, especially with how digital is still being handled today. We're still seeing games being delisted so they can no longer be purchased. We've seen cases of people not even being able to re-download games they have purchased. There's been lots of talks and thought about what it actually means to own digital media, especially thanks to recent comments made from someone at Ubisoft in regards to getting used to not owning your games anymore because subscriptions are the future. It's honestly just a big headache of a situation and growing pains of something that, yeah, is going to be the future we enter, but is it necessarily going to be in the best form it can be? And timeline-wise, while I think digital only is an eventual future across the board, Xbox has always felt like the company where that's probably where it's going to happen first, right? That's the company that's going to spearhead doing it the most, because especially the route they've been going this past generation, where I've talked about this a few times. While Xbox Series X and Series S systems exist as hardware, they're not really the focus for Xbox. I think that they are much more interested in Xbox as a platform in general, and digital plays a very large role in that because it not only feeds the idea of getting games directly through their storefronts, but also the accessibility of them from a consumer standpoint of being able to go between different platforms easily, right? I mean, one of the big promises of Game Pass is you're able to play games on your Xbox hardware, your PC, or even through a phone making use of the cloud. More so than any other major companies, it is in Microsoft and Xbox's best interest for people to fully adopt digital as soon as possible, because that is really where they're trying to build their ecosystem. Not with physical discs on a physical Xbox system, but digital games that can be accessed and managed through their digital platforms. And like I said earlier, me personally, I've even fallen prey to this a bit, right? Because Xbox as a platform is the one where I am primarily digital. There are a lot of games I care about where I want to own physical copies, and oftentimes I end up picking those up on PlayStation or Switch, and I grab a physical copy there to keep. But a lot of other titles where I'm more interested in maybe just checking it out, trying it out, it's something I want to play, but not necessarily planning to revisit anywhere down the line. A lot of times I play those in Xbox, and that's where I pick them up either digitally or I'm just playing them via Game Pass. As much as I love my physical games, Xbox as a platform really does push the convenience of focusing on digital for them in particular. Now, going back to the specific news that kind of spurred this whole talk, do I think Xbox is going to completely get rid of all their physical games this year? No, not necessarily, but I do think that, based on the trajectory we're seeing right now, the pacing and ramping up of toning down their digital releases is only going to speed up more from here on out. Even if a digital-only Xbox doesn't end up releasing and the focus is still on the current Series X and Series S, where you have a digital-only option and then a physical option, at the end of the day, having an option that still supports physical games and those have already released doesn't mean they can't still tone down how many games are getting that treatment moving forward. I think we've been very lucky these past couple generations of being able to enjoy access to both physical and digital versions of the games, because honestly, physical media itself does have its issues as well. As much as I love the idea that I can fully own something, physical versions of games today don't 100% work the exact same way as physical games that were released in the past, and there's also issues run into with things like scarcity, and just look at the retro market and how expensive some hard-to-find games are versus being able to get digital versions of them that are still available at much more regulated and controlled prices. And that's the beauty of having access to both at the same time, because choice is a wonderful thing, and losing that choice to an eventual digital-only future is just not something I'm very happy to see. And while I don't think it's necessarily going to fully cement and happen in the immediate or right away in this year, it's definitely not looking good. So that was just something I want to talk about a little bit with Xbox's, at least currently perceived, heavier push towards more and more focus on digital at the expense of physical. As always, if you enjoyed this video, hit the thumbs up button to let me know. Subscribe if you haven't yet. I got some more upbeat videos coming up in the future. But until then, I'll see you guys later.